Welcome back, everybody. This is part 2 in my 101 series about how to get started in property investing. The last time I spoke to you guys about thinking about the time resources that you have available and setting realistic goals based on the time that you actually have and you want to and can commit to investing in property. And that brings me very nicely onto the second tip that I have, is to just think holistically about all of your resources. So obviously time is one of those resources, and it's a very, very big one. And actually I would argue it's probably the most important because it's the one resource that we cannot manufacture. But what other resources do you have at your disposal? Do you have knowledge that is, transferable skills that you can bring from your current career into property investing? Or are you learning how to do everything totally from scratch? Do you have funding available or access to funding, or will you need to get funding in order to start investing in property? And if you need to get it, where will it come from? Will it come from investors? Will it come from loans? Will it come from the bank? Will it come from a mix? Do you have savings? Do you have, stocks and shares, or, equity in other properties, etc.? What resources, financial resources, can you bring to bear on this on your property investing? And then lastly, this is a really important one that I think doesn't get talked about enough. What people resources do you have? And it could be the very practical resources, such as, tradesmen. Do you know good decorators and plasterers and plumbers and that kind of thing? But it's also the people in your network, professional network perhaps, who are investing in property already themselves, or have skills, that you could potentially bring to bear in your property investing. So, take a very, very, very close look at your resources and think of resources in the broadest term possible. And again, sort of the buckets that I tend to clump them into are time, money, people, and connections, and knowledge. So those 4 things: time, money, people, connections, and knowledge. And do an honest assessment of what your resource pot looks like at the moment. And again, as I suggested in the first part about, looking at your time resources, looking at all of your resources, then come up with a very realistic plan and a very realistic set of goals that, you can achieve in the coming years or months or whatever it is, given your current state of affairs. Now, just because you have certain resources or don't have certain resources now doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get started if you feel like, oh well, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough knowledge or enough connections, and blah 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 blah. All of those things can be fixed. Like I said, aside from time, you can get more of all of those things. So this is not to demoralize you or to say you can't do it or shouldn't do it, but it's really just to be very honest with yourself and make sure that you're aligning your goals with the reality of your situation. And I want to encourage you to do that so that you don't get demotivated if you think, oh, well, I should be shooting for the stars and I want to build the next Shard, or I want to do, a huge development of, hundreds of apartments or houses or whatever it is. But I'm only starting with, 500 pounds in the bank. So I know it's not going to be that extreme, but the reason I ask and I tell all of our coaching clients to think and sit and actually list out all of those resources that go in those 4 buckets: time, money, people and connections, and knowledge, and list out very specifically what resources you currently have at your disposal or could get access to easily, and then adjust your goals accordingly. So you are setting realistic targets that are achievable, and that success that you achieve will then create momentum for you to have more and more and more success. But you want to get started right, and again, like I said, with a realistic understanding of what is possible given where you are at the moment, so that way you can set those targets accordingly and then grow those targets and stretch those targets as, again, you amass more resources of various kinds. Of the resources, I think probably the easiest to sort of accumulate is probably knowledge. Now, there's so much wonderful knowledge out there, both about money, about investing in general, and then specifically about property. Obviously, you can come back and keep watching the YouTube videos that I'm posting here. But try to get as much knowledge as you possibly can. And as you build up that knowledge, then you can then more confidently, again, either readjust or expand your goals, and then start taking action into actually achieving them. So I hope that makes sort of nicely ties into the first lesson. And I hope that makes sense and giving you very clear and actionable sort of homework to work on as you get started in setting your goals. As I said, this is part of a 101 series for sort of newer investors or first-time investors to really just give you some tips and pointers on how to start thinking about investing in property and what you can do given where you're at the moment. Again, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I'd love to see them in the comments. But otherwise, please come back for tip number 3 as part of this 101 Getting Started in Property Investment series. And I'll look forward to talking to you again then. Thanks.